Welcome to the Bitcoin Mentor podcast, guys. Today I'm very excited to have Ben Perrin with me. Ben, welcome. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm happy to be here.
We're building a business called the Bitcoin Mentor, and Ben is one of the original co-founders based in Canada, and we're going to cover the story as to how that became the case. So to kick things off, Ben, wind the clock back, teenage years through to maybe studying. What were you really passionate about, and the route to becoming who you are today? Were there some particular moments of difficulty, or run us through what that was like for you?
Yeah. So let's see how far to go back here. I mean, as I was in and around high school age, I had just come out of my shell as a very shy kid, not super social. But then I kind of got into the arts. I was hip hop dance instructor for a number of years. I sang in an a cappella group. This is kind of post high school, but I just started dipping my toes in my high school years. And paired with that, I was woefully unaware of how to manage money on a personal level. And so I grew up in a family, we weren't super well off. There were times where we were, in I won't say in dire straits, but it was difficult to get groceries on the table sometimes. And I could tell that sometimes my parents had a rough go of it. And I also learned some, we'll say, not great spending habits. I think I kind of came out of it with an attitude of spend it or lose it, as some might say, as design, as society is designed for us to lean towards. And so that very much worked on me. And I spent a long time living on not great paychecks because being a while it's kind of a cool thing to say as a job. Oh, I'm a hip hop instructor and I'm going to schools and teaching kids how to dance and break dance and all this stuff. It doesn't necessarily pay the bills. And so during that time, I had some side hustles that I kind of just self taught. I learned how to, just a simple idea, but buy used MacBooks because I knew everybody always is happy to have, typically the Apple products don't have a trouble being resold. So I would buy a used MacBook and then I learned how to just simply tear out the hard drive and the RAM and swap them out for newer parts and kind of upgrade them a bit. And then I could flip those and make a couple $100, a few $100 in an afternoon doing that. And so that would kind of subsidize my lower income that I had going to give me a few extra bucks here and there. And through doing that and looking up things like that on tech blogs, I came across Bitcoin a few times and would see those articles. Oh, Bitcoin is this new digital money, and oh, it's gone up a bunch. And you see it enough times, you have enough touch points, you get curious and you start to dive in. And so that was kind of my initial foray into that realm.
And so those articles that you remember coming across, roughly when was that?
That would have been throughout 2013, multiple times, ignoring each one, seeing
Mm.
price points in the title, saying, "Oh,
Can't be true.
yeah, I missed the boat. Must be some sort of scam, whatever."
So
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it? And I don't want to get here yet, but like back in 2013, would you ever have envisaged you'd be sitting doing what you're doing today?
No,
No.
no, not whatsoever.
It's
It was
amazing, isn't it? We'll get to today in later in the conversation, but it's so interesting to me that I really think of you as like one of the leading Bitcoin educators in the world, and your YouTube channel that you've built is incredibly valuable. I'm sure for yourself personally, but also for the now millions of people that have come across it and watched it. And it's funny how even back then, not that you realized it, I like this concept of non-linear productivity where you didn't realize that like tinkering around with a MacBook was one day going to help you understand all these different Bitcoin technologies, or equally that the transfer from being a kind of shy teenager into being a dancer and a singer, you're actually a media personality with a YouTube channel, and that they're completely connected.
mhm.
And had you not been interested in those things before, then the output or the outcome of today just wouldn't be possible. Do you feel that's the case? I mean, we rarely look back and think about those things.
Yeah.
We are the sum of all our parts in that sense.
It's an odd confluence. of skills that were built over a number of years that resulted in this very unique position and this very unique living that I'm able to make doing this. There's like you said, the artistic and we'll say performance part of it, being comfortable
Yeah,
in
like
front of
the
camera.
theatrics. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, being able to speak and talk in front of cameras or audiences, that definitely came through as something that was very useful. The I suppose self-taught technical stuff,
Mm.
just kind of looking up online and figuring out how to do something through trial and error, but also the educational part of it, even though it's totally different topic, it's still there's a skill set required to break down complex movements to small children that is not that far separated from breaking down complex technology to adults. As long
Mm.
as you can understand the underlying topic and are able to break it down in digestible pieces, then that skill kind of transcends whatever the topic may be. Again, as long as you, as the teacher, have a good grasp of it, I think.
Mm. It's like when you build a framework that's suitable for one thing, you can reapply that framework in other areas that you never imagined before, but you have to kind of crack the problem in the first place or create the code.
Yeah, yeah, very much. It was again a number of different things that kind of all came together, but that educational piece definitely is one that I think can apply in many different places. And let's say Bitcoin disappeared tomorrow, I think the skill set would still apply and would
Yeah.
still end up being the way that I would go forward making a living, perhaps
Mhm.
educating in another area. But I think that would very much be my path nonetheless.
I'm immediately struck by how if you've already built one YouTube channel to the size and success of today, then because you said the other day it's taken 8 years. It's 8 years since you posted your first video. Just incredible work. Well done. I wonder how long it would take you to build a YouTube channel of the same size, impact, and value today if you had to do it all over again. I like all those lessons that you learned that took a long time. Some of it is just a case of consistency, time, and proof of work. But there are other angles to it where you will clearly be able to cut corners. If you had to guess, like how long would it take to recreate that?
Oh, it's tough because it would be very dependent on the topic. I think
Mm,
that the reason that the channel has, I guess, continues to be successful is it's a tad of proof of work and just a function of having been early in the space. The reason, the impetus for the channel was in and around the fact that it didn't exist, right? That
mm,
solution wasn't there, and I had been searching for it myself. And so, yeah, if I were to go from scratch in some other topic, I think I would have to hone in on something relatively new and
mhm,
niche. But the lessons that have been learned would definitely help expedite a lot of it. And perhaps it could be achieved in, half or a quarter of the time. I
mhm,
don't quite know. Maybe.
mhm,
Or
mhm.
it could be a giant flop. Who knows?
Well, and exactly, you wouldn't know till you tried. It's a fun question though, just to think through how one takes the lessons and learnings of previous entrepreneurial exploits and can then almost productize it to then go, okay,
Mm.
well, this is much more streamlined and it will work. One thing that I remember from our last conversation that just draws on that kind of theatrical side of things is the genesis for the name BTC Sessions. So why did you call it that?
Yeah, so prior to really diving into the education part of it, I put on a couple of different events in my hometown in and around the arts. And so again, I had an a cappella group. I knew a lot of acoustic artists, things like that. And so we would put on these events, and the idea was we'd have these different acts perform on stage. The tickets would also get the user or the individual that bought the tickets, they would receive a certain amount of Bitcoin with their ticket. In the venue, there was a Bitcoin ATM. And then on the walls, we had pictures of the bands with QR codes overlaid that would be effectively the ability to tip the Bitcoin you received with your ticket to the band that you really enjoyed or split it up or whatever. And then in between acts, we would have little explanations of, oh, here's a wallet, here's how to use it. And so people would kind of gather around different tables and learn. And then we would do the next act. And so it kind of came about as back in the day, there were these AOL sessions where they'd get different recording artists to do sets. And so the term sessions was directly, I suppose, music related in that
Yeah,
sense,
yeah.
at
It
least in
makes me
my
think of a
mind.
band. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So again, I feel like studio sessions, that kind of feel. So I called them the Bitcoin sessions. And then as I made my foray into focusing on video content and education, I just kind of shortened it a bit to BTC sessions.
Yeah, awesome. And
Yeah.
I always love learning those things because sometimes a brand or a name, you kind of just take it for granted. And then
Mhm.
of course there's a story behind it. So the word education has already surfaced a number of times. What makes you so kind of passionate about education, and teach us about what that journey's been like?
One of my favorite parts of when I was still teaching dance was those moments where I would explain something a number of different ways, and then I would see that moment where I phrase it a certain way or, show the movement a certain way, and somebody would go, "Oh, I get," and then they would start doing it correctly. And those little moments I loved. I kind of lived for those moments of realization. And again, the ability of people to make those breakthroughs, I think, has always had a bit of an impact on me, and it never stopped as I moved into Bitcoin. I am a pretty visual learner myself. And so as I was kind of diving down the Bitcoin rabbit hole looking for resources, I was looking for video content, and there was none to be found at that point, back in 2000, in and around that time. And so then I started trying my hand at it, thinking that from the perspective of somebody who was not technical and had to just muddle my way through it, and through trial and error come to a conclusion of, oh, this is how it works. I think having that was helpful for me to distill it in a way that people would understand that was non-technical, because I was coming at it from the perspective of, I don't understand any of this, how do I do it? And then once I got it, I was able to think back to what I had thought before and kind of explain it how I know I would have liked it explained to me.
Mm,
um, and so, yeah, whenever I get that question, "Oh, well, you're not technical," you said. How is it that you're doing a technical channel? Again, it's that trial and error and just consistent tinkering from the perspective of an individual that really was in the dark about a lot of this stuff. It allowed me to have those moments myself, those aha moments of, "Oh, okay, this is how it works." And then it allowed me to experience those secondhand through other people as they were basically actively watching me learn, and
mm,
then coming to me afterwards and said, "Oh, I learned something from you." And it was just this kind of nice full circle back to my roots of teaching and having those moments to, as things got rolling with the channel, oh, I get that feeling again. I get that moment of people having those aha moments when they suddenly glimpse just a fraction of how Bitcoin works and what its implications are. And so, yeah, it's very much the satisfaction that I get from doing the channel is very much rooted in the satisfaction I got from teaching in the early days.
and what I love about hearing that is motivation comes from different things. We're inspired by all manner of experiences, and I can feel you talking about that. I can actually like, oh, I feel like I've just made a video with you in some ways. Like that experience is not necessarily something that is reflected financially. Like that's just something that you love doing.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at successful businesses or successful creativity just as a wider bucket, the person that is good at doing what they do is doing it because they love doing it. And it doesn't matter. They're just doing it. They would be doing it anyway, even if they weren't, being paid for it, so to speak.
Mhm.
And I'm incredibly grateful in some ways to sit alongside yourself and be building out Bitcoin Mentor Australia to feed on that. That's the kind of thing that then inspires me. I'm also non-technical. And that was one of the big hurdles for Bitcoin for me was I mean, I come at this from a much more investment angle. And as an investor, I learned that I actually didn't need to know everything. I just needed to know someone that knew everything.
Yeah.
And actually, that doesn't mean you need to know one person. You need to know a bunch of people that all know different stuff very well. And in particular, I got a grasp of this when I was doing some early stage, what's called angel investing. So looking for very early companies, buying equity in those businesses. And you can do it through what's called a syndicate. And so
Mhm.
in my case, it was like 100 investors that had, you know, all sorts of different areas of expertise and amounts of capital. And
Yeah.
so when an idea comes along, you've got 100 people that can analyze it. And then should you all choose to invest together, you've then got 100 people who think it's a good idea and can then bring their skills and expertise to the table. So it's always very interesting to see how when I come across Bitcoin, I'm like, oh well, Ben's done the work essentially. I can look at even only just a small percentage of your videos and go, okay, well, that all makes sense. And if he's bullish on it and he's looked at all this stuff, well, then I can leverage that to make my own decisions. And so that education piece is a big driver of what you want to do in the future, I assume.
Yeah, yeah. It's a function of realizing that kind of a pair of things, I suppose, is the channel is very useful in educating a lot of people in a lot of places quite effectively. But there's always going to be people that need a little bit more. And I only have so many hours in the day. The
Mm.
only thing more scarce than my Bitcoin is my time. And
Mm.
so, that was a little bit of the impetus of what we're now working together on. And yeah, it's scaling that out and complementing the resources that I've gradually created over 8 years with more of a personal touch that I can kind of fine tune and allow to become its own thing.
Yeah. And so for people listening, so the episode that we released first was with Mike, who is your co-founder in Canada. I encourage people to have a listen to that because his journey to this whole experience is also really fascinating to hear. But for you, Ben, talk to us about Bitcoin Mentor and why did you want to start the business? How did you come across Mike?
Yeah. So I, for a few years, have been doing on top of the channel, booking myself for one on one education sessions. So this would
Hmm.
be somebody that's perhaps come across the channel or my website or whatever, and they have seen some of the tutorials, have tried doing some stuff on their own, and have just said, I need somebody there with me guiding me through. I need active feedback as I'm doing this. A lot of people, they'll run into a hurdle as they're looking through a tutorial video, and then they'll go, "Oh crap, I'm stuck now. I can't get past this one thing. I can't do anything else." They're at a standstill.
I know
Or
that feeling as well. You're like, oh, this
yeah,
isn't fucking working.
yeah, exactly. Or it could be that somebody's just they're very cautious and worried that they're gonna screw up in the midst of doing something, even with a video accompaniment. And they want the comfort of that person there of saying, okay, no, that's correct. You can go ahead with that. Just for that first time, they're really averse to making little mistakes. Or think that a little mistake could become a much larger mistake.
Hmm.
And so booking myself out for these, I got progressively busier over time to the point where I think in December of this past year, I was booked for like 30 hours within the month. And that was taking a week off as well in there for Christmas. And so I realized that there's no way that I can keep this up. The channel and everything else will suffer in doing this. And so I had met Mike at the Bitcoin Rodeo, which is a local event that we hold here in Calgary once a year. The year before, I had met him in 2023, and we'd seen each other in passing at a couple different events. And he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I'm working on something. I was just looking for some advice on it." So we got together and had a coffee, and he kind of described what he was looking to do. Basically, a bit of an educational slash potentially like a multi sig type service combined with some education, combined with a couple other things. And so we fleshed a bunch of things out. And at the end, he said to me, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Well, I think I want to be involved." And so I kind of again outlined to him where I was at with all of this and how busy I was, and recognized the value of being able to put together a team of really excellent educators. And I've seen some other great educators, out there in the space, but everybody has a different way of teaching. And I've got a very specific way of teaching. And there's certain things that I look at for in educators that I very much value. And as we got talking, we started to kind of get the ball rolling. And Mike, what I love about him is that he makes things happen, right? He's not going to sit around and wait. And so things happened very quickly, kind of starting to build out the initial team. We put up a posting on bitcoinerjobs.com, and I didn't even put my name on it necessarily. If you went through the process, you would have seen that I was involved, but it was very just a general, hey, Bitcoin mentor, this is what we're planning on doing. If you'd like to be a Bitcoin educator, reach out to us. We had 350 applications
Mm.
in a few weeks.
The
And
talent's amazing. Yeah.
yeah, it's unbelievable. And through that process, we had a bit of a gauntlet where Mike would do multiple interviews with the individual, kind of distilling, just the personality fit. Are they a hard worker? Are they driven? All of that kind of stuff and their general experience. And then if they get through that gauntlet, they had to come to me and they had to do a session where they taught me something, where they would teach me how to use a wallet or teach me how to use some hardware as if I had no idea.
It's so funny. For Bitcoin geeks, that's like a serious moment, isn't it? It's like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god, I'm doing a BTC session with Ben. This is insane."
It was fun to be on the other side of it. And yeah, so we only had so much room for so many people. And so we whittled it down. And out of those 350, we came to a 16 at the end of it. And there's some awesome people with different skill sets that we kind of onboarded. And now we're basically building out a crack team of Bitcoin educators. We're doing weekly meetings where I will explain things that I've come across or show how I would teach about certain concepts. And we're building out resources for them to continue to level up. And we've got a bit of a matrix of who knows how to do what. And we're basically just building out this team and trying to level them all up as much as possible so that people can come to us with whatever their questions may be or whatever the learning trajectory they want to go on. And we know that we can offer them and pair them up with a quality person that will actually make sure that they come out of the experience going from zero to hero. And so
Mm.
that was kind of the birth of it. And I mean, it's funny to talk about it and the creation of it in past tense because it feels like it just happened. That's how kind of quickly things have been rolling. But I'm very excited about it.
Mm. And it's such a cool problem to have, having some of the I mean, it's only just minute parts of your journey in a sense that we've covered just in this conversation, but to think, you're tinkering with MacBooks and then you're also performing and then it's like, "Oh, actually, I'm gonna create this thing with Bitcoin," and then boom, you build the channel, and then before you know it, it's like, "Well, actually, I just physically do not have the capacity to supply the market with
Mhm.
the demand for my tutorial hours." And into your life comes Mike, who's looking at things as an ex-entrepreneur who's basically, he's a retired entrepreneur. He doesn't need to do this, but
Yeah.
just loves it and has such amazing business pedigree to sit alongside someone like that who's actually built businesses before. Okay, cool. Well, he's going to have a bunch of shortcuts for where he made mistakes in the past. That's a good bet. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And then suddenly it's like, okay, now you can start to see how all the work that you've done in regards to the tutorials and the channel can be leveraged in a different way. And we'll probably come up with other different products over the years to come that will have different angles. But the thing I really want to draw on here is the kind of character that you were looking for. So when you say you have a specific educational style that you like,
Mhm.
could you expand on that a little bit? What is it in the type of video content you're looking for, or the demeanor of the person, or the rigorousness of the investigation? What kind of things really excite you when you come across someone's stuff?
It's literally all of those things. You kinda had to have a bit of everything because we figure we're gonna be dealing with a mix of people. There's gonna be the newcomers that are just super timid and they wanna feel comfortable, they wanna understand things as they're taught. They want somebody to speak to that is trustworthy and that is personable. And so you couldn't just come to me and say, I understand a whole bunch of technical stuff about Bitcoin. That is not nearly enough. You can know everything in the world and you can be a horrible teacher.
Mhm.
So you had to understand a number of these things and be able to not only understand them, but be able to break them down in a way where you can explain them to others. That's obviously very important. So I'm looking at somebody's ability to take a difficult concept and distill it in a way where has that moment where they go, "Oh, I get it now." I remember there's even and I'll touch on it in a minute, but there's a specific question that I asked of people, and every time if somebody got it, it was like in the back of my mind, I'm like, "Okay, this is a yes." So I'll let you know what that question was in a minute. But the other thing is conversational skills and personality, because that's a
Mhm.
huge part of it. You can
Mhm.
be very technical, you can explain things well, but if you're cut off and you're cold and you are lacking conversational skills, then people coming in are not going to have those moments of like, oh, like this is great. I'm really having a good time learning and it's a lot of fun. And you want them to feel that too, because it's supposed to be. It's you're learning exciting things that are changing the world and you're becoming more self-sovereign, and that shouldn't be a boring, stressful environment. That should be a fun, exciting session that's full of curiosity and
Mhm.
discovery. So again, personality, ability to converse, ability to distill information and make it accessible, and then just general underlying knowledge of everything is all very important. And it's surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly at all, it's difficult to find people that tick all of those boxes in one. Very difficult. And
Mhm.
that's nobody's fault because those are very different skill sets. And for them to all converge, it doesn't happen super often.
That's something that resonates a lot. It's very difficult to, and not everyone's gonna be a Bitcoin mentor, and that's okay. If you
Mhm.
don't fit into all those buckets at the same time, it just means it's not the thing for you, and there is something out there that, that absolutely is. But you touch on a few things there, and I think this is where I'd like to go, which is the phrase self-sovereign.
Mhm.
So what does that mean to you, Ben? And how does Bitcoin Mentor enable people to become self-sovereign?
Yeah. So self sovereignty is effectively being able to have control, and in the context of Bitcoin, being able to have control of the fruits of one's labor in a way where nobody can tell you no, in a way where you can't have things easily confiscated or frozen, and in a way where they're secure from would be attackers that would like to separate you from your coins, and also self sovereign in a way where you feel comfortable using the tools that you're using. You're not constantly having to get, somebody else to do it for you. You are self-sufficient and you grow to be a very self-sufficient Bitcoiner. And so the second part of that, you were asking how we plan to achieve that. Is that where you're going with
Well,
this?
it's more like put yourself in the shoes of a potential customer of
Yeah.
Bitcoin Mentor or a protege, as we're calling them. How does what we've built help them become self-sovereign?
It's building out, and some of this isn't even present on the website yet, but it is allowing somebody to come to us wherever they are in their learning trajectory and say, here's where I'm at, here's where I'd like to be. And then we're able to build a pathway based on the individual's preferences of where they can get. And on top of that, we can sprinkle breadcrumbs to encourage them to go even further than they might have in the first place. And
Mhm.
so I'd say self sovereignty is is a spectrum, of course. And some people will go much more hardline than others when it comes to the tools that they choose to use. But at the ends of those spectrum, you would get, of course, there's the non-Bitcoiners, and they're just completely, they've not even dipped their toes in. So the ones that have just started into the Bitcoin space that are existing on this kind of ever growing spectrum of self sovereignty, those are the ones that maybe have just purchased Bitcoin, but are sitting in custody with an exchange somewhere.
Mhm.
And so I think our job is to get them moving towards a far end of the opposite spectrum in as delicate and as conscientious of a way as we possibly can. And what I mean is, it doesn't matter where the person starts, right? You're not going to make fun of a child who's learning their alphabet because they haven't read Human Action yet. It's a silly thing to do. So
Still
we
haven't read that fucker. It's a big
yeah,
one.
it's a doozy, right? And so you're not going to make fun of a baby who hasn't taken their first step for not running a marathon yet. We need to gradually get people to as close to that side of self sovereignty as they can be. So things like understanding self custody, understanding hardware and cold storage, and maybe day to day spending wallets and circular economies. And where can I use my Bitcoin? Or running a node so that you can verify your transactions, or Bitcoin privacy practices, or the plethora of scaling and privacy layers that have come about, especially in the more recent future, and kind of discerning the trade offs and benefits that they can offer. There's so much to learn. And depending on the person's interests and what their goals are, and even their preferences of tools, because all of the things I described, there's a plethora of different tools that can be used in all of those things. Distilling that down and figuring out, okay, we're going to start here, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and in each of these steps, which tool are we going to use? And just being nimble and cognizant of the protege and where they're at and what best suits them and where they can be, and then even giving them a gentle push to go even a little bit further. I think we can do that if we approach it the right way. I often say that Bitcoin has been plagued by teachers that, despite commonly preaching low time preference, teach in a very high time preference way, right? You can't have somebody day one come in and you say, all right, first thing you're going to do is you're going to set up a node. And then you're going to set up a wallet and link it to the node. And then you're going to get your hardware. If somebody is starting a journey and they take a single step, and then you put something in front of them that causes them to turn around and walk out, you have failed your mission of education. And
Mhm,
so what we need to do is not think to ourselves, where does this person need to be? It's, where does this person need to be next? And that's a
mhm,
very different answer from where you'd
mhm,
like them to be down the road. Learning is very personal and unique to each individual. And I'm hoping that we will build, and that we have, and I'm pretty sure we do, that we have a team that is going to be capable of catering to those individual needs.
mhm. Just listening to you talk about it's making me even more excited that I'm involved in this in some small way. The thing I guess I would like to really highlight here is that, at least how I see this, you could sit down and trawl through 8 years worth of your YouTube videos, and you could teach yourself all these things if you
Mhm.
wanted.
Yeah.
Equally, there are other YouTube channels or other podcasts
Mhm.
or other websites. Absolutely, the information is out there. But speaking for myself, at least, I like to pay for implementation. And part of that is a hand-holding process,
Mhm.
but the other part of that is I'm not gonna spend 8 years doing this, okay? I need to know tomorrow.
Yeah.
And in particular, as a capital allocator, I think of capital in a number of different ways now, in that it's not just about financial capital, it's also about your own skill set, so investing in yourself, and also about your relationships, so your social network.
Mhm.
And Bitcoin Mentor actually has the ability to cater to all 3 of those different buckets. From a financial capital perspective, you're buying Bitcoin. That is a
Mhm.
big deal from a capital growth perspective. But equally, you're investing in yourself and you're learning how to look after your Bitcoin in a best in class way. Like,
Mhm.
you, Ben, have spent 8 years researching all the different tools and thinking about the best way of setting yourself up. And what Bitcoin Mentor reflects is actually a productized system of all of the things you've learned that you
Mhm.
believe work best for yourself. And then you've handpicked a team of people that are capable of delivering those things in a way that's actually suitable for the individual. And so I think it's a very compelling offer, frankly. It's like, you come to us, you can leverage all the stuff that we've learned, and you can do it in a way that is going to be on your terms. Let's see what happens. I mean, it remains very early, so the business is only launched, a couple of months ago, and here in Australia, we've got a sister company, Bitcoin Mentor Australia, launched only last weekend. But it's what gets me so excited is I think of all those times I was anxious about something I'd done. One in particular comes to mind where I bought some Bitcoin via an exchange that was recommended. I'd sent it from the exchange to a wallet that I controlled, and it just didn't turn up. And it wasn't in the exchange. And I'm like, where's it gone? And for about 3 days, it was like, it takes the idea of losing your wallet to like a whole new level.
Yeah.
It's not just canceling a card, is it? It's
Yeah.
gone. Where's it gone? And at the time, it's a very healthy amount of capital. Anyway, it was a bank holiday in the UK, and the crypto exchange I was using, it was a Bitcoin only one, but because of the size of the transaction, needed a human to verify it. And they came in on Tuesday morning and they're like, "Yep, cool, done." And it arrived. And you're like, you suddenly
Oh, so
breathe again.
it
But like, had I
showed the reduction in balance, but it hadn't executed the
correct,
on-chain transaction. Oh,
correct.
man. What a
And it's
heart
like,
attack-inducing
that's the one that
experience.
comes to mind. You're like, "Oh." And so had I had a mentor that I could, like, basically call up, because that's really what this is in my mind. It's a service with accessibility on
Mhm.
demand. So wherever you are in the world, you're gonna be able to book a video call, ideally within, 12 hours of right now. I mean, I'm not sure if we've quite got to that stage yet, but in theory, it'll be as easily accessible as any lawyer, any accountant that you need help with, and it's a professional service. I need to call someone right now because it's
Yeah.
not in the right place. What have I done? And there's any number. I mean, perhaps you could think back, Ben, over the last 8 years. Like, what are some of the most heart and mouth moments that you've had? Because it
Oh.
is at the end of the day, we talk about self sovereignty, like taking responsibility of your money
Mhm.
is, on the one hand, extremely scary, but on the other hand, incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
And when you get the other side of this hill, you're like, you feel like Superman in some
Yeah.
ways. It's epic.
There's definitely been some moments of extreme jubilation with people that I dealt with. There's also been, you know, things where people come to me and say, like, "Listen, this is what I've done. Can you help me?" And sometimes, sadly, the answer is it's gone.
Yeah.
The thing that you've
Ouch.
done. Yeah. And those are tough ones, but hopefully moments to learn from as well. Some of the moments that I've just loved are, people that have purchased Bitcoin from an ATM years and years ago, and all they have is like a slip of paper, basically the equivalent of just a paper wallet that was printed off from the ATM. That's all they have. The QR code is no longer able to be scanned. And so you're manually putting in the typed out private key into some software to recover. And then all of a sudden they discover tens of thousands of dollars or something like that, or people that have sent Bitcoin to a wallet and they certainly have the correct wallet, but they can't find it. And then you discover that there's some sort of weird derivation path thing where it's just was in a different address type or something like that. Just those moments of relief where you see somebody, they do what they tell you, and then you see them click and they go, and they see it and it's there. And those I love those moments where they're like, "Oh my god, thank you. Thank you so much. I was having it." And sometimes they're saying thank you for silly things that, like, I didn't even really do much, where they'll be in Sparrow Wallet and it's just not connected to the Bitcoin network. There's that little toggle switch in the bottom where it's like connect to a node,
Mhm.
and that's off. And so they haven't seen the transactions that have arrived from the exchange with a whole bunch of money, and they're
Wow.
panicking. And I'm like, "Is that little switch turned on?" And they'll click it and go, "Oh my god, it's there." Like like I
Mm.
did something. There's a lot of great moments and some of them more complicated than others, but those moments are always so rewarding when you can help somebody that's in a pickle that just needs to sort through certain things that they may be unfamiliar with. And I very much value those times.
And so in some ways, what Bitcoin Mentor is, it's like the human touch.
Mhm.
So Bitcoin is a technology. Without Bitcoiners, it would be nothing.
Yeah.
And navigating something new requires help. And
Yeah.
that's really what this is all about. So start looking forwards, Ben. Where do you see this thing going? Like in your wildest dreams, if we fast forward kind of 12 months or even longer, what do you hope to build?
I think my ideal situation would be somebody goes to Bitcoin Mentor and they pull up a page that has a list of different education tracks, and or maybe they answer a few basic questions about their goals and aspirations, and they're presented with a variety of different learning packages that they could do. And one might say, okay, this is your general, your basic self sovereignty package. And that includes obtaining Bitcoin, key management with hot wallets, your choice of hardware, and setting up and connecting your nodes to your own stack and being able to do all of that by the end of 5 sessions or something like that. And then within that, we say, okay, well, here's the sessions and what's going to be covered for each one. Do you have a preference of tool that you're going to use for each one? So, drop down menu, you're in this place. Here's some exchanges. Drop down menu, here are some of the hot wallets that we like. Drop down menu, here are some of the hardware options that are out there that we'd be more than happy to teach you about. Basically, being able to tailor something to an individual's preferences and have them go through that and basically get the full package and be handheld through the whole thing to their liking and adjust those packages as they see fit. I want people to have the most in depth but easy to understand experience learning exactly what they want, and then also be informed of other curiosities that they may be inclined to take a look at down the line. And so that's what I envision for this.
Yeah, awesome. It's really exciting. And I think about the curiosity angle. Every time you get sent some kind of software update on your iPhone, it's like ding, you've got to do X, Y, Z. And I mean,
Mhm.
I'm useless. I just kind of scroll and just click,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Can't be that bad. But when it comes to Bitcoin, it's very serious. It's like
Mhm.
you're not just updating your messenger on your phone. It's like, no,
Yeah.
hang on, this is your money.
Yeah.
And could it be the case that the tech stack that you previously built 2 months ago, 2 years ago, whatever the case might be, could it be significantly better? And I definitely see an ongoing relationship with the business like Bitcoin Mentor that's very healthy for both the business
Yeah.
and also the protege, because things will change.
Yes.
And I mean, inevitably, you could probably speak to this better than I. So, how much has the Bitcoin space changed in the last 8 years? And therefore, how much might we expect it to change in the next 8 years?
Yeah. I mean, it's changed a lot and it's changing faster every day. And so I'm glad you touched on this and we're going down a little bit of this rabbit hole because a lot of the discussion that we've kind of referred to have been I've been referring to people as relative newcomers. But that's also not always the case. In fact, often than not, it's not necessarily the brand newcomer. That will definitely be a huge portion of it in the midst of a bull run when, there's a lot of speculation going on. But I think a huge subset of the people that we're looking to help also are what I'm going to lovingly refer to as Bitcoin Luddites. And so there's this phenomenon where people are forward thinking enough to dive into Bitcoin and say, I'm all in on this. I love it. I'm going to use it and secure it and do all of the great things that I hear that I should do. And they do those things once and then they never update what they're doing or take a look at anything else. And then years later, they're wondering, do I still have a good setup or should I do anything? Like, and they get frozen in place because it's like, I did this one thing once. I'm kind of scared of the fact that I haven't dealt with it very much. And maybe I'm hearing that the hardware that I'm using isn't the greatest anymore. Or maybe I'm hearing that the software I'm using is maybe there's something better. Or I don't know how to use Lightning or anything. And, maybe I've been DCAing $50 at a time with Bitcoin and I hear that's now bad. And there's something called UTXOs. There's this subset, I'd say a vast majority of Bitcoiners actually, that are not kind of up to date at what best practices are.
Hmm.
And a lot of people that I've had come to me and that we've had come to mentor are actually just people that are saying, I need to either update my setup or migrate to new hardware or just get a finger on the pulse of what I've done and if it still works for me at this point. I think there's going to be a lot of that. And you're absolutely right. It can become more of a relationship because security and privacy and all of these things that are important in Bitcoin, they're moving targets and things are constantly shifting. There's constantly new technologies to try and become privy to. And so we're going to cover all of it. Anything that we think is beneficial to individuals to be familiar with or utilize in their day to day, we'll make sure our mentors are educated. And then when we're ready, begin offering it as one on one options as well.
If you want to manage your wealth in the traditional sense, maybe you've got real estate, maybe you've got stocks, maybe you've got some bonds. They need to be, consistently managed. Otherwise, it might all go to zero.
Yeah.
And then the day that the penny really drops with Bitcoin, it's like, hang on, so this is a deflationary savings account.
Yeah.
I've just got to store it. It's the lowest touch wealth management strategy that exists
Hmm.
without anything else that can even come close in my mind. And so someone like myself, actually, you might have got through one cycle and your investment's done very well. And you might still think of it as an investment rather than necessarily a savings account.
Hmm.
But I would much prefer to spend $1,000 to upskill myself and come straight to what is the cutting edge toolkit that you can use today from yourself than redo all the research all over again that I did 2, 3, 4 years ago now
Yeah.
and go, yeah, I'm going to pay for implementation. I'll learn it. I'll learn at the same time, but I'll get the best in class. That's very powerful. I hadn't really thought about that as a potential target customer, but I would personally be in those shoes, definitely, because you're like, okay, well, I've got some money. I'm happy to pay.
Yeah.
Just who do I go to? And I want them to teach me about self sovereignty. I don't want to get stuck on a product where I have to call someone to move something. That's not
Yeah.
self sovereign. Even if
Yeah.
it's Bitcoin and self custody, if someone's managing a key for you and
Mhm.
you can't do everything you want on your own, well,
Yeah.
you're not self sovereign. It's a very important distinction as well. So,
That
oh, yeah, exciting.
Yeah, and that's and just to tag on to that last point, self-sovereignty comes from being able to do things unilaterally without permission. And so we do a multi-sig thing. It's I wouldn't say it's the core of our business whatsoever, but we taught all the mentors about an assisted multi-sig using Nunchuck because we liked the solution. And when we first were looking at it, Nunchuck offered like a 2 of 4 multi-sig solution. And basically, it would have the client or protege holding 2 keys. If it was in the context of just Nunchuck doing it, Nunchuck would have 1 key, the client would have 3. If it was in the context of their what's known as Byzantine, it would be the client has 2, Nunchuck has 1, and Bitcoin Mentor has 1. But when we looked at that, we're like, I don't think we would necessarily do that. While the individual has the ability to unilaterally move funds, there's a risk of collusion between Bitcoin Mentor and Nunchuck. And that's not ideal because we have enough keys between us to move the funds as well. Not that we would, and we would need actual collusion for that to happen. But the fact that it was
There's still
possible,
trust there. Yeah,
yeah,
you've got to trust those people. Yeah.
exactly. And so it was kind of neat because we reached out to the guys at Nunchuck and we're like, hey, we're thinking of doing this thing, but here's our issue. Could you code us up a 3 of 5? And they did. Like within a month, they had the whole thing ready for us. And that allowed the client to have 3 keys, us to have 1, and Nunchuck to have 1. So we could not collude to steal funds. And the client could always unilaterally move funds without us, but then had the fallback of both ourselves and Nunchuck. And
Mhm.
so we were pretty happy to figure that out together and begin offering it. But it's important, that as you're helping people get set up, you're also not requiring them to trust you with custody of your actual funds.
Mhm. To highlight, I see the main value initially for Bitcoin Mentor as not a collaborative custody play at all, but
Yeah.
actually, as we've discussed at length, the ability to put someone at peace of mind
Yeah.
wherever they are on their journey and steer them to where they need to next, right? Collaborative custody is actually a very advanced
Yeah.
um, setup and very specific to whoever the individual might be. But the point I was going to make is that I hear Bitcoin tech stacks and they talk about Bitcoin the right way. And
Mhm.
just anyone out there, just be very careful when you hear that kind of marketing talk because it's the right way in their opinion and in the interest of their business. You've got to dig as deep as you can. It's like, well, what does self-sovereign actually mean?
Yeah.
And what you'll start finding is that people who are selling Bitcoin the right way that's not necessarily the right way from a self-sovereignty perspective, and they're very different things. Any final things you want to say as we close the episode out, Ben? And obviously, where do you send people if they want to get in touch?
Yeah. The last thing that I'll just tag on to what you just said in
Mm,
terms of, yeah, using Bitcoin the right way and it being a very personal thing. I'm always going to have an opinion as to what I like best. But the whole idea behind Bitcoin Mentor is to present the proteges with the possibilities that are out there and let them know the benefits and trade-offs of each, and then let them piece together what their learning trajectory looks like and what the tools they most prefer are, and then we can help them with that. And it makes me think back to my wife in her career as a nurse. All through nursing school, she learned something, and that was always kind of always like hammered into her mind. And it was that no matter what, you always advocate for your patient. You present them with as much good information as you're capable of doing. But at the end of the day, it is their decision what they do with that information. And I think I want to take the same position
mm,
when it comes to Bitcoin education. Our job is to best inform you of what is out there and the benefits and trade-offs of each thing, and then allow you to decide what you want to learn based on the information we've provided. And so I think that's a good way to go about it. And I hope people enjoy that as well. It's meant to be catered to them and their desires and their goals. So, in terms of where people can find myself, I'm on YouTube and you can find me BTC Sessions, pretty easy search. I'm also on X and Nostr. You'll be able to find me there. Pretty simple. Just watch out for spoof accounts. Just at BTC Sessions will do the trick. And then in terms of Bitcoin Mentor, bitcoinmentor.io. And then I believe you guys are Bitcoin Mentor Australia.com.
Australia.com. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Well, yes, that's where you can find everything. And again, I encourage those people that maybe that last little part we're talking about Bitcoin Luddites, maybe that struck a chord. If so, then give us a shout. We
Mm.
can help you out.
It's amazing to hear the story so far, and I look forward to doing another of these episodes maybe a year from now to see how we've managed to get on in that time. If I could summarize your last point, it's basically a business that wants to be as customer centric as possible,
Mhm.
and it's not a case of putting together what we think is the best product and therefore pushing that at people. It's like, no, hang on, what do you want? And here are the different options.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Ben.
Thanks for having me, man. Enjoyed it.
Cheers.